When I was younger, I never imagined that I'd find wisdom in the voices of people who lived long before my time, people whose world seemed so far removed from mine. But as life started to throw its lessons at me one by one, I began to realize that the deepest truths often come from those who lived the closest to the earth, to the seasons, and to silence. My name is Jeremy Carter. I grew up in Missouri, in a small town where everyone knew everyone. I was raised with traditional American values, went to a regular high school, played football, chased girls, and eventually landed a job in corporate sales in St. Louis. But despite all the things that made my life look successful on the outside, something always felt like it was missing. And I wouldn't discover what that was until my life took an unexpected turn. I was 34 when I lost my job. The company downsized and I was caught in the wave. For months, I tried to keep up appearances. I dressed every morning as if I were going to work, sat at coffee shops with my laptop, pretending I was busy with some important business. But inside I was unraveling. My confidence collapsed. I felt like I had no direction, no purpose. One rainy afternoon, while packing up my boxes to leave my apartment because I could no longer afford the rent, I stumbled across an old book I barely remembered buying. The Wisdom of Native American Proverbs. I must have picked it up at a flea market years ago. Something about the cover, an old black and white image of a tribal elder under a vast sky, spoke to me in that moment of despair. So I sat down and opened it. The first proverb I read was, "It is better to have less thunder in the mouth and more lightning in the hand." It hit me like a punch to the gut. All these years I'd been talking big, talking about dreams, goals, what I was going to do someday. But I had done so little of it. I had filled rooms with words but rarely backed them up with action. That line didn't just speak to me. It exposed me. I started reading more. And as I read, I began writing in a notebook. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't being preached at. These proverbs weren't giving me rules. They were offering truths. They were like mirrors. The next one that stood out said, "Listen, or your tongue will keep you deaf." That's when I realized how often I listened just to reply, not to understand. It dawned on me that this habit had cost me more than I could count: relationships, trust, even peace. I remembered my ex-girlfriend, Dana. We'd been together for 3 years. She left me, not because of a major betrayal, but because she always felt like she wasn't heard. I'd always brushed off her concerns as overreactions. But now, reading that line, I knew I'd been deaf in the worst way. I took the book with me as I moved into my brother Tom's basement. It wasn't ideal, but it gave me the space to be alone and think. Over time, I made it a habit to read one proverb a day. Then, I'd reflect on it, write down how it applied to my life, and try to live it out. Some were more philosophical. Others were painfully practical. One morning I read, "Don't let yesterday use up too much of today." That day, instead of spiraling into regrets, I got out of the house and took a walk through a nearby forest trail. Felt like the first step back toward living in the now. Soon, I started volunteering at a local cultural center that offered Native American history classes. I didn't do it for a paycheck. I did it because I wanted to understand more about the people behind these proverbs. The center was run by a man named David Runninghorse, though he'd gone by David Reynolds since high school. He was part Cherokee, part Choctaw. David became a friend and mentor, though he'd never have called himself that. He just talked with the kind of calm that made you want to listen. I told him about the book and how it had helped me. He smiled and said, "The earth has been whispering wisdom for generations. Some people just take longer to hear it." I asked him once if he had a favorite proverb. He nodded and said, "When you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice." That one stayed with me. I wrote it down on a piece of paper and taped it to the wall above my bed in the basement. Every morning I looked at it. It became my new North Star. I had spent so much of my life chasing money, approval, and status. Now I wanted to chase meaning, connection, and legacy. I began helping David with youth outreach programs. Some of the kids came from tough homes. Some were from reservations. Some just needed someone to listen to them. I didn't have all the answers, but I had stories. I shared with them how I had let ego guide my choices. How I had burned bridges because I thought being right mattered more than being kind. How I had let fear stop me from taking chances. And I also told them how those old proverbs had slowly helped me rebuild. Not just my life but my sense of who I was meant to be. One of the girls, a 17-year-old named Olivia, once asked me, "Why do you believe in these old sayings so much?" I thought for a moment and said, "Because they don't come from a place of trying to impress anyone. They come from watching the seasons, watching the animals, watching people over hundreds of years. They're not trendy. They're eternal." She nodded slowly, then pulled out her own little notebook. "I've been writing down the ones you read us," she said. That moment meant more to me than any sales award I'd ever received. The more time I spent at the center, the more I started to understand a deeper layer of these teachings. They weren't just about personal development. They were about harmony. Harmony with others. Harmony with nature. Harmony with self. There's a saying that goes, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children." That completely shifted the way I lived. I stopped buying things I didn't need. I started biking more. I planted a small garden in my brother's backyard. These weren't drastic changes, but they made me feel more connected to the world around me. Eventually I found work again, this time as a counselor's assistant at a local rehab center. It didn't pay what my old job did, but it filled me in a way money never could. One of the men I worked with, a Vietnam veteran named Hank, had been through hell. We'd sit and talk during his sessions, and I'd sometimes share proverbs with him. His favorite was, "Certain things catch your eye, but pursue only those that capture the heart." He told me he had spent years chasing things that looked shiny. Cars, women, promotions, but they never gave him peace. Only when he reconnected with his estranged daughter did he find that sense of home again. I wrote more too. I started a blog where I shared a new proverb each week and how it had changed my perspective. I never expected it to get much attention, but it started to gain a following. People from all walks of life commented. Some said the proverbs helped them through grief. Others said they helped them reconnect with loved ones. A few even said it helped them forgive themselves. That was the most powerful one. Because I knew what that felt like, to look in the mirror and carry shame. One line that saved me during those times was, "It is no longer good enough to cry peace. We must act peace, and live in peace." That line taught me that healing isn't passive. It's a choice repeated every day. It's in the way you speak to your neighbor. In the way you forgive your past.